From the Venture Accelerator at UCLA Anderson, Accelerate, an entrepreneurship podcast, hosted by entrepreneur in residence, Rod Kurtz.
What does the long view tell us about the future of entrepreneurship, especially at such an uncertain time? Welcome to Accelerate, a new podcast from the Venture Accelerator at UCLA Anderson. I'm Rod Kurtz, entrepreneur in residence. While all our guests are distinguished in their own ways, our guest today is in a league of his own. Al Osborne is UCLA Anderson's Senior Associate Dean for External Affairs, where he oversees key areas like resource development, alumni relations, corporate initiatives, and executive education. He's professor of global economics, management, and entrepreneurship. He's the founder and faculty director of the Price Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. He also happens to have served as Anderson's interim dean in 2018 and 2019. The list quite literally goes on and on. Dean Osborne's signature Anderson baseball cap is a fixture on campus, along with his warm smile right under the brim. I've had the privilege of sharing thoughtful conversations with him over the past several years through my work with the Accelerator and the Gerald Loeb Awards, and it's a pleasure to share this conversation with all of you today. Dean Osborne, welcome. It's great to see you. Glad you're safe and well. How are you holding up amid all this, and what's keeping you busy?
Rod, thank you very much for hosting. It's a great opportunity for me to chat with you. I'm well. My family's well. We're healthy. My wife and I were ensconced in a nice part of the world for the time being. But obviously, we are, like everybody else, concerned about the challenges the coronavirus, as well as the episodes associated with social injustice, have brought on our society. These are trying times. We're holding up well, but they're times that cause reflection and opportunity. And to answer your first statement, the long view for entrepreneurship has really never been better because of the challenges and adversity in our society. This is where great things can happen. And I am a great believer in, first of all, the resilience of the American entrepreneur, and to the idea that there is a rainbow even in these difficult times. And at the end, there might be a pot of gold because there are many challenges that need to be solved by enterprising and innovative people. And I have a lot of faith in the young people of our country who see clearly and are adept with new ways of attacking business models and using technology and other platforms to be able to get to customers in a way that I and perhaps those of my generation are out of touch with. And so I am optimistic about the future, even though these are dark days for some of our fellow citizens.
Well, I think that's a great point, and I was reviewing some of your past work and past lectures and past statements, and you said at one point that societies that don't innovate are destined to die, and I think that this is really a moment that speaks to that, and you have the benefit of such a long and distinguished career. You've seen so much in the entrepreneurial and business world. Where do you think we're at with entrepreneurship right now? You mentioned it can be a great opportunity, and I'm seeing my work with the Accelerator and other startups and entrepreneurs that some are thriving, some are growing, expanding, thinking big, thinking past this. Where does entrepreneurship stand right now?
I actually think it's actually in a good place. The economics, notwithstanding, a small business and large companies that have had to deal with things that are approaching depression levels in some industries because of the pandemic, things are actually, I think, as good as they can be in this environment. And if you are hopeful and have a vision about the future and are thinking about it, the fact that you've had this temporary setback, these last 4 months have been challenging. Let's not put it, and there's a lot of folks unemployed, and there's folks worried about their families and getting back to school and the rest of it. But all of that creates opportunity. Where there's great adversity, there are problems to be solved. And in my view, we need to get on with it. And let me just talk globally for a second about this issue. Take the environment, for example. Take a lot of the concern for things ESG, the environmental and the social and the government. Right there is the potload of opportunities for young people who are now equipped in a way that my generation wasn't to deal with it. I sometimes kid myself and say, we destroyed the environment, messed up our society, had poor governance, and some of us made a lot of money doing it. And now is the time to clean it all up. And cleaning it all up is opportunity. And I believe that as we think of what it is young people today are looking for, they will make a mark, building off of the knowledge that they've developed, and they're adapt and flexible. And I see it in the formations that right there in the accelerator and others where, although there may be losses, but there may be profits when things come back as a result of persistence and staying with it and believing in your vision of a better world.
I love that. I love that. As we're talking about the long view, a lot of people have been trying to find some kind of comparison from history, because we're in uncharted waters. I've been joking that unless you're 110 years old, you've never lived through anything like this. None of us have lived through a global pandemic. What comparison, in your experience, do you see? Is this akin to the Great Recession, 9/11? I've been making the World War II comparison, where it's really a global common enemy that we're trying to defeat, and we know we will, but in the meantime, everything's uncertain. What lessons from the past do you think we can draw from in this experience?
Boy, Rod, that's another great question. Let me attack it by separating a couple of things. First of all, pandemics come and go. They be with us, whether it's the issues of smallpox or polio or the influenza. And our society will find a way to deal with that, because you have to adapt. And if you don't adapt, you will perish. And if there's anything I've learned about the human race, even though it's only been on this earth for a short period of time in the span of the universe, there is opportunity to then be able to deal with these through discovery and innovation. To dealing with science has never been better. They're good at what they do, and they'll find a way to do it. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but it will be solved. But it may be costly. And the challenge of leadership in our society, though, is to mitigate that cost by being wise about how you deploy resources to get people through issues like a depression. And I mean the word literally. A lot of people are depressed. A lot of people are uncertain about the future. A lot of people don't have trust in our institutions, and that's our fault. We need to step up. We as people, particularly in the United States, need to use our voices and be heard. And if there's any model, as I think about Martin Luther King or John Lewis, for example, there are folks who have pointed the way that if we sit back and let things happen, particularly in the S&G area, we will perish, or we'll find ourselves losing our democracy. Now, I think the American experience is the most important creator of wealth in the world. To give that up to folks with authoritarian tendencies or social structures that might not lend itself to our ability to bounce back effectively or manage the pandemic in a thoughtful and supportive way and an equitable way, then we will be doomed. So all of us need to participate in the progress to preserve the democracy so that we can get back to the business of building the wealth that's going to make it possible for everybody who comes to this country to engage in our experiment, to find a rung on the ladder so that it can improve itself. And I look to immigrant entrepreneurs who have come here with nothing and are able to make it throughout all the generations. I look to the government to step in as they did after World War II to create the necessary social infrastructure that allows people to feel they can have confidence in the government. Why do governments exist? Well, they exist to be sure that the people they serve are able to have a fair an equitable shot at the life that democracy promises. That's it. And do it in an honest and open way. But if there are forces that I think try to tear that down, or we need to speak up, we just can't let some of the lessons of history where people were silent and said, well, it's not going to affect me, it's going to affect the other guy. And then they find out in the end that it affects everybody. Well, we can't let that happen. And this is why a democracy is so important as a way of governing. And we need to be able to participate in that process. So we can vote at the ballot and we can vote with dollars. And entrepreneurs, I think, see a great opportunity to be able to serve in a whole variety of ways, repairing the systems that are not working well for us. And in doing that, we will do a great service to our society and make a little wealth for ourselves.
Well, that's a great point. I've been having a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs and CEOs throughout this experience, and one mentioned that now is literally a time where you can reimagine everything about yourself and your business, and to your point about the country and politics and everything else. So I do think it's that's been a silver lining, is that we all have this opportunity to kind of look inside and see what kind of future we want. I'm wondering about just your day-to-day, what's keeping you busy? What are you focusing on with Anderson?
Well, before I answer that question, let me say here, it's important that people do not despair, and that they find activities that give them the opportunity not to be depressed, but that they hold and have the deep conversations that might be necessary, so that they themselves feel that there is a North Star that they can follow that's going to restore the things that we value or care about and in the American experience. I came to this country from Central America, with 2 suitcases in my hand when I landed at San Francisco International Airport on my way to Stanford. And this society has allowed me to actualize and contribute in a variety of ways. And I think that that's the beauty of the American experience. And we can't allow that to fail just because some people have different views about race. And whether or not one group's of lives matter or some other, all of those create a chance for us to re-examine our humanness and our position in the world, and recognize that we're all the same, but that there are environmental factors that make some people dark and some people light. It's as simple as that. And if we kind of can as we can see that inside what people are all about, and not just what they wear, whether it's a hat or a different skin color, that they are able to then cross that chasm and begin to create a world where in fact one race, the human race, that all people, and therefore this artificial difference, if we can break it down, and I think we are doing that in many ways, but we need to stamp out forces that will try to divide and create the fear and uncertainty that drive us to have bad economic climates. That's not good for entrepreneurship. And so I had to sort of say something about that, because I believe that the environment upon which we're able to work has to be one that supports the ability for us to engage in contracts, for our ability to trust what one person says, what another says, when we go out to do things. And that's where the rule of law, and that's where that part of governance becomes an important underpinning. And if there is things like corruption, that it has to be dealt with. It can't be accepted, because all of that creates uncertainty. And so what I'm doing right now with my time, this is summer, and being a professor, I have the chance to think. I'm working on some issues related to governance. I sit on a number of boards. I have the opportunity to engage in leadership opportunities, and some as I've had over my lifetime, some great corporations, and be sure that I help those corporations, I think, move forward in a way that allows them to recognize these challenges and begin to do the right thing by using my voice, by speaking up on the platforms that I might have, not only for the shareholders, but for all stakeholders. So governance of our organizations are something that matters to me. Second thing that matters to me is the whole issue of creating access and opportunity for those who, because of things like the color of their skin or how they were born or the zip code they live in, have not had the chances that I had and that others had. And that has to be corrected. Everybody needs an access, an opportunity to be put on the ladder. And to the extent that things like reparations and so on are on people's mind, I think there's an opportunity here for a great infrastructure build out in all of these areas of ESG that we talked about to help put a footing for our society for small businesses, which is the core of many communities, to be able to survive and prosper. Now that they've been essentially obliterated, there's a way in which that can come back. And entrepreneurs should take advantage of all of those things. And so I'm thinking about those issues, and I'm giving some of the programs we've developed in the Price Center. We're continuing to do them just in another form instead of in person. We'll do them online, we'll pivot, we'll have some sort of hybrid approach to some of these things. And the best I can do is share my knowledge about how you build businesses and create value with entrepreneurs or small business people or people who are suppliers to large companies who want to make a difference and maybe don't have the management know-how and skills or the entrepreneurial models to use. Well, I want to help. And if I can help them a little bit better than they saw them, and that's one of the things we're doing in the Price Center, whether we're working with Head Start or community clinics or disadvantaged women and minority businesses, we want to be sure that they can be the best that they can be. And in that regard, those are some of the things I'm thinking about and working on ensconced here in Cape Cod.
Well, I love that you're staying busier than ever, albeit virtually. I guess that kind of gets to my next question is, what do you think we're missing by not conducting business and learning in person, but also on the flip side, what are some of the benefits and silver linings of this? I would argue that this podcast and this conversation is one of them, that we wouldn't be sitting down like this necessarily to have a wide-ranging conversation. So that's a byproduct of the situation. So what are the pros and cons of this Zoom era that we're living through?
Rod, I welcome the Zoom era, but Zoom works like between you and me because I already have a connection and relationship with you.
Absolutely.
So in person and Zoom can be complementary, but Zoom requires, to be successful, that I have a confidence and relationship and trust in you so that we can do this electronically. So I think that one of the downsides is that you miss that in-person contact. And let me just say that matters. And when you're talking about businesses, relationships are important because in truth, even though we're a society where contracts and lawyers play an important role, the fact that I can look you in the eye and say, I agree to do this, Rod, and you can have faith in my word because you know me. It's hard to do the no thing electronically without the erase. So that's one of the challenges. The second thing I think, is, with everybody Zooming, there's a new date, there's a reinvention that's going to go on in how we actually organize, say, education or work or other issues. It is possible that many activities now are going to be online. That maybe they are so much away from the people contact that they don't need to be, say, anything else but Zoomed. And think about outsourcing of certain activities that are not critical to the mission, that are really mechanical in some way, and technology can take care of all of that. And we see that there's been a lot of adoption of that. But what the pandemic did, it was made us accelerate because we really had to deal with a major risk to just being in person that can be viewed as a negative, but it was a positive in the sense that it got us thinking about new business models and new ways of probably being efficient at getting certain kinds of things done. And so there is a cost and a benefit associated with that. And there are other couple of things I could enumerate that speak to that. Just think of how we're going to reshape the whole world of department stores. I mean, I have bought more stuff online than Amazon and Nordstrom and wherever it is I go. And so the efficiencies in the logistics and how we move products and services from suppliers to customers, all of that has changed. And I think for the good, because it's lower the cost of doing that business, and it will force firms to develop new models, and shareholders will benefit from the efficiencies, and management will find new ways of doing what they were doing more efficiently and creating, therefore, more value, eventually better margins. Now, that means we need to think differently about property. So the whole idea here now of who has property rights on this in the online world is very different, and that's going to need some examination and some clarity. And of course, if you view that as just another store, for example, as opposed to, say, an in-person store in a mall, you can see that there are a lot of activities in the supply chain and resources that are being challenged that maybe we don't need anymore. Think about how you redeploy real estate when department stores are vacant. Affordable housing might be something that comes to mind. So all of that creates, and I'm thinking about these different kinds of things in my time here as I try to deal with not just the science of it and what we need to do for health, but what are the spillover and external effects that has been caused when the economy has tanked.
Well, I'm flattered what you said at the top about that and our relationship, and I look forward to the in-person version of this sometime soon. But in the meantime, Zoom is a great substitute. But to your latter point, I think that's so important. You know, we named this podcast Accelerate as obviously a nod to the accelerator, but I think this situation is accelerating everything that was going on prior. And I've said to people that a lot of the pivots that entrepreneurs and businesses have had to make because of COVID is stuff that they probably already should have been doing. And it's stuff that will benefit their business long-term, long after we're past this. I'm wondering if you can sort of speak to that idea that we're being forced to make changes that are actually good for us throughout this.
Yes, when I think about this, I always think about Clay Christensen and the innovator's dilemma. Things are going along very well. When you are in business and you've got some customers, you're making money, they're happy with you, you innovate, perhaps incrementally, because there are no threats to what it is that you're doing. And things move at a nice pace, perhaps expanding at the rate of GDP growth, which is acceptable. But every business or every environment is often threatened by some upstart, an entrepreneur that is thinking differently. And that upstart may be at the margin of what's currently being done. But what's happening at the margin, if it's done right, quickly becomes what's central. And the customers that you had before, you no longer have because you have been disrupted. So the whole question of disruption and transformation that has been accelerated has brought into play a lot of other ways of dealing with that finite customer set out there that was being very well satisfied, but now sees the opportunity to be even better satisfied by some upstart who's figured out how to lower costs and offer greater value. And so the notion of that our great industries are facing is that they've been fat, dumb, and happy, by and large, And as the world progressed at a nice, even pace, with no coronavirus to deal with, they haven't had to think in a transformational way. You have to think transformationally today now to be able to survive and be able to attract customers and work with those partners and resources that will allow your value proposition to be something that people like. Just think of the success that folks have had on, say, social media with followers and things like that, that has disrupted the nature of advertising, for example. For years, I was a director of the Los Angeles Times, and we dealt with newspapers. We had cable properties and books and things like that. But guess what? Several years later, there was a disruption that was coming that has changed the whole nature in which how newer generations read. And some of us old guys still like to see a newspaper every once in a while.
I started my career in newspapers.
Nowadays, right here, my Apple 11 puts it all up. So, the way, so this thing has changed a lot in our society. And this device has also changed a lot in way we work with one another. Just think of what this device has done to how we look at police brutality, for example. Just being able to take pictures has changed transformational in the same way in which we disrupt a competitive market. And we are able now to attack social issues the way in which we might, because those are customers and there are ways of doing this that have been destructive or not work. Just like in any marketplace, there are revenues and their costs and their margins. And in the societal sense of the world now, the same things can be applied. And this device is making it happen.
And the wise ones embrace the change. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to point out that you're an entrepreneur as well, in a sense that obviously you're an academic and you've had such a storied career at UCLA, and part of that was founding the Price Center. And I'm someone who, through my work with the Loeb Awards, has come on board with the Accelerator and has really found a family, in a sense, at Anderson and the Price Center and the Accelerator. But I don't know a ton about the history of it, and I'd love to hear about, where the idea came from. You were really at the forefront of entrepreneurship in education, and I'm just wondering if you could share, where the idea came from. How hard was it to convince people that entrepreneurs needed a place on campus, and sort of how it's grown and blossomed since?
Rod, I've been privileged to be a member of this faculty since 1972. So I've been at UCLA 48 years. But in the early part of my career, I came here after I got my Ph.D. at Stanford. And a couple of years into, I had a chance to go to the Brookings Institution as a fellow. At the time, I was doing research on financial institutions and capital market issues. And I went to the SEC as part of my fellowship, do a study on really the whole question of, at that particular time, was lowering the cost of regulation in our capital markets. And I met some very interesting people that I hadn't paid much attention to. I met a group of people that called themselves venture capitalists. And a couple of them came to see me because I was doing a study on regulation. There's something called Rule 144, which regulates the rate at which investors can resell securities into the capital markets. I'm telling you more than you wanted to know. But they said to me, this rule that the SEC has in place is reducing our ability to innovate, gain liquidity, and go back and develop more businesses. So I was introduced to the notion of that business developers and these venture capitalists, and in those days there wasn't an organized venture capital industry of any significance. This is the mid-70s. Microsoft had just gone public, for example, in 75, I think it was. So I said to myself, if I go back to UCLA, venture capitalists are doing great work, but they're funding people who are making a difference. And we have to perhaps be part of supporting and educating those who would like to be entrepreneurs. And making a long story short, that was where the seeds started in my late 70s at the SEC. I happened to be there when Harold Williams, who was a former dean at the Anderson School at the same time, was appointed by Jimmy Carter to be chairman of the SEC. So I was able to work on some important studies that dealt with this issue. And so I was able to, as a result of that, when I did the study that changed the rule, that created enormous liquidity for early investors. But I said, well, let me go back to UCLA and see if I can get some of our students involved. So I created a venture fellows program. And I came back and said, we need to train entrepreneurs. This is where it's at. It's not just managers for large businesses, people who want to start or acquire businesses that are going to grow and create value and use this kind of investment. It was in its infancy. So we started a couple of programs at the time. Dean LaForce was there. The history then was, so I'm trying to truncate it so I don't take too much of your time.
I love it.
Is that I started the Venture Fellows program and with the idea of getting Anderson MBAs jobs in a venture industry to be business developers. And that program has continued for all these years, and we've had enormous success in placing Anderson MBAs in the venture business all over the world, basically, in terms of the number of graduates there. But we said, well, let's start the program. And so we added to what there had been a course, Management 295A, with entrepreneurship and venture initiation. Small business management was another course taught by Professor Schulheimer at the time. And so all I did was decided to accelerate what Hans was doing by putting it in a more organized form. Because at the time, I could do that. I was assistant dean for the MBA programs. At the time, there were just two. So it's basically the job that Miguel Unzueta now has. And I was doing that, and this is how I was able to innovate along those lines. And the center then got started. But let me tell you some specifics about the Price Center on Entrepreneurship. As I was doing this in the early 80s, I met a man by the name of Harold Price. He had been a successful business person. He had gone to the Wharton School, and he had thought that business education lacked an experiential or applied element to it. So he went to his alma mater to try to get them, and they, for some reason or another, decided that they didn't want to do what he wanted to do. And so he said, okay, and his advisors, who I knew, said to me, let's go talk to this guy Osborne at UCLA. And so Ed Appel, who was his financial advisor at the time, Mr. Price lived in Beverly Hills. He had a very successful company that he had sold to General Foods, which is now Sara Lee and so on, and donut business all across the country. And he owned, if you're ever in the Valley, you were familiar with Sportsman's Lodge, which is now transformed. That was his. And for years, Anderson MBAs will flood there every September for a party with Mr. Price. And so he was kind enough to say, well, they don't want my money, but if you do, I'll see if we. So we started out, he said, listen, if you $50,000, I want to see students getting involved and with entrepreneurs and so on. And if you do that, we'll talk again. So I did it, and we talked again. He gave me a little more money. And then we did it again, and we began to have more activities. And finally, one day I said, Mr. Price, why don't you give me some real money? So the Price Center started. It's interesting recalling all of these facts right now, Rod. It's really just to be, just to be. I said, Mr. Price, why don't you give me $1 million? That would give me a chance to begin to build a capital a little way, he says. So he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He says, I'm going to give you 500 grand. I don't like to be in deals by myself. So go out and raise another 500 grand. Then I'll give you another 500 grand. And then you can go raise another 500, then you'd have 2 million. And if you do all of that, I will give you a bonus. Well, the rest of it is history. We did what he said. We had a campaign. We raised all the money, and the program got capitalized. And the Entrepreneur Association is one of the few student organizations, I think anywhere, that has its own endowment, partly because of what Mr. Price wanted us to do. And so over the years, we developed this relationship with Mr. Price. And the center then was able to flourish and continue its effort to build. And we had the capital to do a whole variety of things. We got interested in, so that's how it started. Mr. Price, who is the company, history of his company was not just in donuts, but in popsicles.
Okay. Donuts and popsicles.
And so to this very day, the legacy of Harold Price is something we respect and value. He was a kind gentleman. And through Harold, I was able to meet an awful lot of people who shared his view that management education was too academic, that there was an important part about actually meeting business people, and in this case, entrepreneurs, to then be able to understand the practice. And between the theory and the practice, he thought you'd get a better product, and I happen to agree. And so the notion of the accelerator as the culminating activity, for example, of an MBA experience or a BCO is a chance to actually do it, to develop the resiliency, the ability to pivot and think that that in an environment where the sanctions are less onerous, for example, you got to get a grade and you have to do whatever it is you say you're going to do, is the culmination of what the Price Center was. So a few years ago, with the assistance of Elaine Hagen, who had an important role to play in all of this, as she and Bill Cockrum and I were key partners in building both the capital. We had an excellent board of advisors who assisted us in raising money. And the real money came, and I'll tell you this last story, when we wanted to build the building which stands behind you as a photograph of the Anderson School. Anderson, Clay LaForce needed additional help in closing out the deal. And this is how I got into being fundraising of a significant level. We said, we need to raise another $5 million, and for the building, there were some other things that needed to be done for the $75 million project back then. So I said, I'll help. I said, but let's not raise 5 million, let's raise 10 million. 5 for you and 5 for me. And we'll do it pari passu. And we did. And we created what is now Entrepreneurs Hall. So the founders of Entrepreneurs Hall, their names are there, participated in a project. That was the second largest, the second big financial event that made capital for things entrepreneurship at UCLA. And the pictures are right there in Entrepreneur Hall of the people who were part of all of that. But it wouldn't have happened if Clay LaForce's vision to have a great business school and that we could be part of and identify, Entrepreneurs Hall, where we raised the money, from primarily 20 individuals, at $500,000 a piece. That sort of took the deal. You do the math and you see you kind of get there, and that was important.
Well, I love that story. Because you're a bootstrapper, you're an entrepreneur. As you were starting this, that you were, if I may, you were sort of making it up as you went along, as a lot of great entrepreneurs do. And I think that's why it's sort of in the DNA of Anderson and the Price Center and the Accelerator, that it came about in an entrepreneurial way. And I just, as someone who again has been welcomed with open arms at Anderson, hearing that backstory, it's not a coincidence we get along so well, because I love everything about that. What does, with all that in hindsight and how this all came about, what does it mean now when you see students and entrepreneurs on campus, when you watch each accelerator cohort go through the showcase process and pitching their companies and getting investment and getting acquired? What is that? You have such a history with it. What does it mean to see what it's become, present day?
Well, I give a lot of credit to the students themselves who felt that they wanted to make their mark in the world by bringing about something that was different, that was going to improve a value proposition, if you will, that's made a group of customers better off, as opposed to what else they could have done with the service or activity or the proposition that they deal with. Brings me a lot of personal joy to see this, and to see the activities that the team in the Accelerator, Trish and Janet and Will and the team in the Price Center with Elaine, where all of this got started, just see them smile gives me an awful lot of pleasure to know that we're making a difference. And then to know that our students go off and graduate in some sense from the Accelerator experience, being more confident of their ability to take their place as innovators and entrepreneurs. Well, that's what it's like. And then when they come back and they say, that made a difference in my life, then I can go to my grave in peace, if that's kind of what's my future. Because I've always felt that all I wanted to do was, whether it's through my research or through my teaching, was to touch folks that are going to make life a little bit better and easier for all of us in whatever they do. And for somebody to come back and say thank you for the Accelerator experience or the Price Center, to me is a real blessing. Whatever happens into the future, there have been darker days. That's why I am optimistic, even that the pandemic will yield opportunities for some students who we don't know right now in our classes, who's going to see a way to make life better for all of us. And that's what we're trying to do with our mission in the Accelerator and in the Price Center. Create an environment where students can flourish, where dreams can materialize, and where people can be confident and trust in their ability to make a difference and speak clearly with their voices in the development of an innovation, if you will, of creating a better world, however they want to do it. That makes me feel happy.
Well, I think that's such an important perspective, and that's why I started the show here with this idea of the long view that you've seen so much in your career. And I know from talking with some of the Accelerator startups, past and present, who don't have quite as long a view, it feels like the sky is falling in a sense. And with my view, a little longer than theirs, I'm trying to explain to them that the sky isn't necessarily falling and that there is opportunity here. What would be your message to the Accelerator startup specifically, but really all Anderson students who are worried about their future and what this will look like? What lessons can you draw upon from the past that should give them motivation and hope right now?
Well, first of all, have no fear. Develop the ability to think clearly. Resilience matters. Thinking clearly and understanding the context that you find yourself in, and being systematic about how you react to the things you see, the danger. You'll see then the opportunities. Great entrepreneurs don't take risks, but they are able to see puzzles come together, if you will, how they can then shape events and see the opportunity in adversity and challenges. And that's what this time is. There are a lot of challenges, but there are folks who are going to be able to see how they can put together some pieces. And every Anderson MBA has the ability to think clearly, critically, thoughtfully, and put together a plan, if you will, to be able to be successful in that situation. It may not happen in a day or a week, or it might take a year or two. But if they do it right and they think incrementally and pivot as necessary and stay with it, they will win. And so never give up is, to me, the most important. If you believe that what you're doing, even though you're challenging with your potential transformation, some gorillas or giants in the industry, you will win. And I'm right here in Southern California. There's a wellspring of entrepreneurship again, whether it's in things related to the entertainment industry, technology, or it's related to medical devices, medicine, healthcare, some of the traditional software as a service, you name it. The so-called Silicon Beach is here to stay, and it is expanding and growing, and it will rival our friends to the north. So people are coming here, and they're coming to UCLA because they can be in that context. Coronavirus notwithstanding, social injustice notwithstanding, because we know now that those are challenges that we have to solve, and great entrepreneurs will step up to the plate and create the solutions that were desperately needed in our society.
On the social justice front, I wanted to ask you a question about that. I know that diversity has been a focus throughout your career, and not just racial diversity or ethnic diversity, but the diversity of ideas and backgrounds and that kind of thing. I know, over the past couple of months at this point, a lot of entrepreneurs of all stripes have been asking, what can we be doing? What should we be doing? And, a lot of them don't want to just send out an email blast and think, okay, we did our part and the problem is solved. It's more, how the company operates and who they serve and how they treat their employees and everything else. For entrepreneurs specifically, what can and should they be doing and thinking about right now?
You are right. I believe in what I call cognitive diversity. We need an ability to be able to see through gender and ethnicity and race to get to what it is people really are. And to me, that's about how they think and what they value. And that's really where the discussion should take place. But there's nothing I can do about the fact that, I'm colored. And if you don't know me, that's the first thing you see. And if you have a view as to what that is like, that will dictate where you go. Entrepreneurs or anybody have to get beyond that. They have to say it is not so much the color of the package, but it's what in the package that matters for what it is we're trying to do. And can I work with this person or that person for what it is that we're trying to do as we assemble a team? But it's going to be hard to get past these stereotypes and these constructs we have in our head about what a person that's darker than you is supposed to look like or be, which is the other thing. And so how do we get by? Well, we need to be asking questions. We need to We need to talk with one another. And then what we need to do is agree to act on something that might improve the condition. But it isn't for the larger society to say to the colored people, well, tell me what I should do. That's not the way to go about this. It is, the responsibility really is on the larger society to begin to say, I'm going to make an effort to break down the kinds of things that are systemic to keeping folks off the ladder. The Confederate statue issue is an example of that. What are the signals that the larger society gives immigrants and others about opportunity? And so entrepreneurs have a way of overcoming that and saying, opportunities here, and this is what I'm doing. And guess what? I want you to come along with me. I am going to climb the ladder with you and therefore be part of the solution in a very active way. And I think that's what entrepreneurs can do. And it's, yes, there's philanthropy, but we don't need another elaborate EDI statement. Organizations, those days are over. It's action. What activities can we engage in that demonstrate to our fellow citizens that have been left out or who are not on the ladder that there really is a place for them on the ladder? And it's going to require that the larger society reach out and begin to put some people on the ladder. And some people may not like that because they say, well, you're giving preference. And, no. We're just trying to do something that's better for all of us. And you may think it's preference because you haven't dealt with the fact that this person is colored, and that's all you see. But if you take a broader view and see that we're all human, then you have no problem with the preference issue. And then it's our responsibility then to put education behind this, because an important part of getting on the ladder today is education. And if you haven't had access, entrepreneurs can help create that. We can go into communities, and education doesn't have to be going to an Ivy League school. Education is about learning some set of things, and being able to understand by people being able to be exposed to what's available through access. Help them to choose, and they will make choices, and put them in an environment where they can see the possibilities. And then I think that's the largest responsibility we have. An education institution like UCLA is even more important to find new ways to increase the pipeline of people of color, and I might add, faculty, because modeling matters. People need to see those who have aspired look a little bit like them, given the importance that color has had in our society. And if we do that more and more and more, its importance will diminish. And of course, all of this will happen well after I'm gone, because it is going to take a couple of generations at least to begin to repair what has been around for over 400 years.
Well, as you said, it's an important conversation, and I think so many are happy that it's finally happening in a real way. I want to close with, sort of a broader question. Even in normal times, you're an incredibly positive, can-do kind of person, and I hear that even more so during this conversation and amid everything that we're going through. What's your advice to the wider Anderson family, students, alumni, accelerator startups, everyone in between? How are you staying positive? And what is keeping you what sounds like more optimistic than ever?
As you have suggested, by nature, I am positive and optimistic. It's about the glass being half full or the glass being half empty. And I think you roll up your sleeve and you get to work to improve, to make it better. And so what keeps me that way is I like to think I'm working and I'm living a life uh, that allows me to see the possibilities that can be available for every way in which I become engaged. At the Anderson School, there's great possibilities for engagement if people get out of their silos. The great danger we have is all of the challenges I believe that exist in the world today require that people reach out across whatever it is that they're doing and be more integral with others. The Anderson School, I'm decided, for example, that the Anderson School is working with the medical school. And so a lot of what encourages me is these partnerships, because the challenges of society are not going to be solved by any one discipline working by itself, just going deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. It has to be by reaching across the areas of knowledge and reaching across the different professions and expertises and melding them in a way that you get the result that's going to be better for society. So I see as an important role for leadership in our professional schools. They just can't do things the way we've always done them. It isn't about going deeper and deeper into one little area of research where you only talk to 5 people in academic journals. It is time for those ideas to find fruition in the world as experiments or things that are applied. And it is our responsibility, those of us in leadership, to see that these ideas, whether it's through the accelerator or some set of other financing arrangements with our alumni and so on, that these ideas blossom. And leaders need to force these ideas. If we believe in social justice, then do something about it. I don't know who used to say this, but there's nothing like the right time, and the right time is now.
Exactly.
Wait.
No time like the present.
And so, to me, we need to have leaders that are willing to take that kind of step. And it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be fashionable, because there will be those that want to pull you down and will be threatened by it. And we have, but if we do this systematically enough, in the end, and the end could mean, a couple more generations of Supreme Court justices, or different chancellors or deans, however it is the governance structure works. The governance structure matters because leadership matters. And if you have a business of public service and excellence in teaching and so on, you got to do it, and you got to stand up for it. And when you don't see it, you got to call it out. And you can't hide in the weeds anymore. And you can't be on the sidelines. You've got to be part. You got to be on the playing field, and you got to play the game. And while you may run down and get into the red zone is really where the battle is. And we're close to that. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I really do believe it requires, from my point of view, some leadership, some conversations, some trust that develop, and some action. We just can't talk about it and write nice little principles. We got to live them, and we got to work on them, and we got to bring others along to work with us. Otherwise, we may find ourselves with a society that is not what we thought we were getting, and it's our fault because we didn't stand up.
Well, I think that's a good and constructive note to end on. Dean, I sincerely appreciate all your time today. I'm really glad we were able to do this from afar. As you know, I learned from every one of our conversations, and I'm glad we could share this with the audience today. So thank you. I'm glad you're safe and well, and I hope to see you soon.
And I take my hat off to you, Rod. Thank you.
That is the ultimate compliment. Anyone who knows the history of that hat, I sincerely appreciate that. And I want to thank our esteemed guest, Dean Al Osborne of UCLA Anderson. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Stay safe, stay well, I'm Rod Kurtz.
This podcast is produced by the Price Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at UCLA Anderson. Learn more about the Venture Accelerator at UCLA Anderson by searching our hashtag UCLA Entrepreneurs or visiting our website anderson.ucla.edu/accelerator.